want me to tell you a story."
What kind of story, Mother?
The little one inquired, his teal blue eyes so full of brightness and curiosity. "A fairy tale, little one, which roars like the waves of the sea and is as incredulous as your father's gadgets." The mother spoke, her voice itself a song of wonder and mystery. "A tale of the fury of the great goddess, Gaia, Mother Earth." The little one's eyes alight with glee, his smile covered by the hem of his blanket as he settles in, eyes transfixed on the warmth of his mother's ruby lips. She began, "There once was a fairy, a young little one like you, and his name was Frey. Gaia loved her son more dearly and strongly than anything in the world. Together, they lived in a small thicket tucked away in a hidden mountain valley. Gaia was good friends with the earth and the plants, and together they did all they could to protect young Frey from the scary outside world."
Is the outside scary?
The little one asked, unable to contain his curiosity with barely a hint of fear tinging his voice as he imagined what kind of scary things might be out there. "Very much so, little one. All sorts of scary beasts and monsters, and worst of all, the bronze men," she said solemnly. The little one asked again, fear beginning to show more strongly in his young voice's reverberations.
Bronze men?
The mother reached out a hand and placed it on the little one's cheek, slowly caressing and reassuring him that he is safe here. "Yes, little one, the bronze men, as tall as 3 normal men and nearly as wide. Their skin is harder than any rock and shines like the surface of a still lake in a hue of brownish orange bronze. They are terrifyingly strong, with gnashing serrated teeth and claws and a roar louder and more deafening than even a forest giant. They even have stinging needles. They can spit with such speed that it can take an arm or a leg and kill long before the venom on their tips does." Perhaps she went a bit too far with her description, but she was a jester of a woman and could not resist being a bit playful around a campfire. The little one was shaking now, protected from outright bawling only by the enveloping embrace of his mother, who soothes him with a soft, cooing voice. "But don't worry, little one. You are safe here, with your father and I. The bronze men existed long ago. They no longer walk this earth. The worst we have to fear is just a forest giant. But back then, Gaia feared so for little Frey and bid him to never leave the thicket or go down the mountain, to never go further than a field of her favorite flower, azaleas." She got up after giving her son a soft peck on the forehead, just between his dirty blonde bangs, moving to retrieve exactly such a flower from a nearby pot to show him. "Like this one, but in their thousands, stretched across the surface of a shallow hill. See how pretty it is?" He did, nodding as the distraction of the flower kept his thoughts away from the bronze men, and after a moment he mustered the courage to ask further.
What happened?
The mother nodded solemnly yet again. He did not listen. One day, while playing in that very field, a young girl appeared before him. She was pretty, prettier than any flower he had ever seen, and she begged him to come down the mountain to play. Frey had been lonely, for though he made many friends among the plants and the animals of the thicket, it's hard to have a conversation with a tree, and piglets are often concerned with little more than stuffing their face. She played with each of the little one's cheeks as she mentioned the piglets, and he giggled from the ticklish sensation. She was the first person besides his mother he had ever seen, and he felt so inexorably drawn. But he was a good child. He could not just ignore the words of his mother. But how she begged and cried, for she too was lonely at the bottom of the mountain. She was the only child in her village and had no one to play with.
No one?
The little one softly cried as his own eyes began tearing up at the mere thought of such loneliness. "No one," his mother confirmed. Eventually, he relented and came down the mountain to play, though they didn't go very far. But as fate would have it, the bronze men were there, looking for signs of disobedient children, for they had the tastiest hair.
Hair?
The little one shouted in confusion and disgust. His mother chuckled. Children were so easy to flabbergast. Yep, they eat hair,
Is that why grandfather's head is shiny?
he asked, and elsewhere his grandfather sneezes. His mother gives a playful nod with a wide smile, and they both laugh heartedly at her father's expense. As they both calm, the mother looses a soft sigh. But yes, the bronze men were there, and there was nothing two children could do. They took the disobedient Frey away, far, far away. So far, Gaia could never hope to find him again. She was furious and forlorn. Her sadness turned to an ocean of tears, and her rage shook the very earth and imbued it with her anger. Now, the earth itself rumbles and moves, churning like the meat and vegetables in a boiling pot of stew. As if called, the child's stomach grumbles at the thought of his mother's beef stew, and he looks at her with those adorable begging eyes. But she must resist, so instead she chuckles softly. No, no, little one. You've already had dinner. Eat any more, and you won't be able to sleep. I'll make an extra big breakfast for you in the morning, okay?
Okay.
He says longingly, silencing his hunger before asking again.
What happened next?
The mother took a moment to think. Her head rocked gently side to side as she pondered, before deciding to continue. Gaia cried. She cried and cried until she had no tears left, and having exhausted herself, fell asleep. She slumbers, even now, at the heart of the earth, far beneath us, past even the roots of the mountain. But her rage endures. The rumbling heart of the earth churns around her still, protecting her and her children from the bronze men whom she feared may return. The little one, ever curious, spoke up again.
Children? I thought Frey was gone.
His mother shook her head. Yes, but Frey is not Gaia's only child. Gaia gave rise to all that treads upon the earth. You, me, my parents, and theirs before them, every plant, every animal, everything.
Even the forest giants?
He questions. Even the forest giants, though I know that might be hard to believe. For unlike Frey, who was born of Gaia's love and compassion, we and everything else was born out of her loss. Her tears and her rage are what gave rise to us, and that is why we must fight to survive, though it is only right that we respect the forest and its denizens, and offer proper rites for their sacrifice for our sake. She answers. Her own voice darkens as she talks of the more serious topic. The little one's eyes alight with understanding, and he probes further.
Is that why we burn sticks at dinner?
His mother nods. Yes, the smoke of the incense gives form to the spirits nearby and allow us to properly bow our heads to them in thanks. So remember, little one, to always pay respects to the dead, for it is by their end that we live on. Now get some rest, little one. You have a big day ahead of you tomorrow. She gives her son one last kiss on the forehead before properly tucking him into bed and snuffing out the candle. As she closes a door on her way out of the room, a man standing in the hallways softly calls out to her. He's going to grow up airheaded if you keep filling his head with fanciful stories. She sighs and rolls her eyes, crossing her arms and almost playfully harumphing. He's going to grow up with respect for Mother Earth and the forest. If that's airheaded to you, Adam, then I wonder why you bothered marrying me. Adam walks over and gently wraps his arms around his wife, placing her in the crook of his neck as his chin rests atop her head. Because, Eve, I love your head, hair and all. He blows on her ear playfully, and she giggles and weakly pushes. Stop! You'll ruin my hair. Maybe I wouldn't have so much air in there if you didn't blow in it. The two share a short bout of laughter before gently returning to an embrace of both their arms and lips. Later, as the two lie in bed, Adam breaks the silence that followed their passion. She's right, you know. She's not just afraid that they'll come back. Also, It was Freya, her daughter, they took, remember? For all the stories you tell, I'm surprised you don't listen to mine. She shifts slightly. I know, but I think the story would be more interesting to our son if he could relate, you know? And besides, I was trying to scare him only slightly into not sneaking out at night. It really is dangerous out there. I still think it's too early to be taking him out on his first hunt. Adam pulls her in closer. Shh, it's okay. It's all right. He can't get away from me without me knowing about it. And even if he did, the defense grid is in top condition. I make sure of it every day. No giant is ever going to make it within a dozen miles. And we aren't going out further than that. And if a bronze man really does come down, I'm prepared for it. One of her hands moves to place itself on top of his. I know. I get worried. You're so smart, and you make all these wonderful things can't make heads or tails of. I have a hard time trusting a metal pole. He kisses the top of her head. If you can't trust a metal pole, then don't. Trust me instead. Since I made the pole, can you do that? Her own green eyes softly close as she whispers, slowly falling asleep. Yes. Adam responds. Good. Also, I definitely didn't beg and cry. She smiles, though he can't see it. Shut up and go to sleep, crybaby. The following day, Adam was out at the edges of the perimeter, doing his usual morning routine of checking the defense grid to make sure the sonic resonators were functioning. Forest giants were highly sensitive to specific sound frequencies, so all it took to keep them away was to annoy them with a loud one. Some days, such as today, he distracted himself as he idly performed his checks, thinking about how he was going to teach his son all of this. Today was his 8th birthday, and it was time to start his proper education, while also teaching him to hunt, as his mother wishes. It was time to finally pass down knowledge Adam had spent millennia building up. He wondered what kind of amazement might find its way into the boy's eyes as he began to truly understand the world around them. Not just through myths and fairy tales like those his mother told, but through the lens of higher reasoning. It was then that he heard a strange, but terrifyingly familiar noise. His heart rate immediately spiked, and a cold sweat developed within moments as he turned towards it, looking up at the sky. There, he saw a circular disc floating directly above where the house is. It spun and spun, the light of the sun reflecting off of its surface, reflecting in a hue of brownish orange. Bronze. They're here. He ran, sprinting as fast as he could. He leapt over logs and under thickets, swinging off of pre-placed ropes and bridges to cross a distance no normal man could hope to cover in such difficult terrain. But he lived here. He spent centuries making this place as safe as it could possibly be, and that included familiarizing himself with it so thoroughly that he could travel its entire breadth in an hour or less. But he didn't think about any of this, not that he needed to. Instead, his thoughts were of Eve and his son, Cain. He doesn't know how the bronze men found this particular place or why. He knew they would return, since Gaia seemed so certain. But he could not fathom a reason for them to even try and land on a world like this. He looked up. The disk is still there. They aren't landing. As he nears, his heart sinks to his stomach as he sees 2 small pinpricks of silhouette flailing in the air as they slowly rise to an opening on the underside of the disk. He sees, also, 2 shinier figures beside them, holding them in place. How could this happen? Why didn't his grid activate? Why didn't the defenses shoot down the vessel before it even entered the atmosphere? How did they get through? How did they get past my detection system? He wondered aloud, huffing out the sentence with ragged breaths from his short sprint.
Because your technology is primitive, slave of Gaia.
A deep rumbling and robotic voice spoke from behind him. Adam turned, activating a cybernetic weapon he'd implanted in himself, only to be immediately met by a gleaming orange fist, followed by darkness. When he awoke, he was in a cell. Across from him was a transparent pane of what seemed like glass, though he couldn't be sure. Past that was a walkway of some kind, on the opposite side of which was an identical mirrored cell that held his wife and son. His immediate reaction was visceral. He leapt to the pane, calling to them, but his ears could pick up the distant lack of echo, as if his voice was simply vanishing into an endless void, some kind of soundproof material. In any case, they couldn't hear him, but they could see him. They, too, leapt to the barrier. Their mouths moved, but no sound reached him, confirming his suspicions. Thankfully, he taught both of them a unique form of language involving only hand and mouth motions, mostly for use during hunting. His wife was a hunter, and they developed this private language so that they could communicate without alerting prey while they hunted together, and their son picked it up easily. "Eve, are you okay? Is Cain okay? Are either of you hurt?" Adam signed in panic. Eve signed back calmer than him.
Yes, we are fine. They threatened us, but I did not fight, as you said I should, if they ever came for us.
Adam slumped, breathing a sigh of immense relief. He knew Eve's temper and had always held a deep worry that if the day ever did come, she would not be able to stop herself. He'd seen what these bronze men could do, what they would do. He used to have nightmares about what he might see of the aftermath if he were ever too late. The question was why. He'd spent ages pondering reasons they might return. So many, in fact, that he can't be sure what exactly they want. Is it revenge? But why capture them if so? To torture? But it has been so many years, the details about the bronze men's species were never known to Adam. He was a child when they were first driven from the planet. Were they long-lived, like him? Could they be the very same ones that took Freya? If vengeance is the goal, that seems the only possibility. But what if it's not vengeance? What if they believe Adam has something? What if it's not Adam they want? The one that hit him said, "Slave of Gaia." Is it Gaia they're after? There is far too much he doesn't know. He doesn't even know if they're going to bother questioning him. He didn't have to wait long to find the answer to that one. Two massive humanoid figures, each of them towering over Adam by at least 3 times, their skin shining, the same gleaming hue as the hull of the disc-like spacecraft they're aboard. No gnashing teeth or claws, though. That was Eve's idea. But they did have stinging needles, high-tech weapons to be specific. Adam had seen them used when his village was slaughtered, and he cared not to conjure up such memories in that moment. The barrier suddenly vanished, as if it had never been there, and Adam nearly fell with it as his weight suddenly went unsupported. But he caught himself, only for a bronze hand to very ungently grab him by the arm and start dragging him out. Adam complained loudly in an almost exaggerated tone. "Hey! Easy on the arm! I just got that tuned!" It responded by crushing the cybernetic limb and practically snapping it in half. Adam screamed in pain because he had instilled lifelike sensors in the arm. It made it feel real and let his brain use it with exactly the same ease and precision as the real thing, which of course included pain. Unlike a real arm, however, it didn't bleed or knock him unconscious, just hurt like hell. Now down an arm, the other bronze alien grabbed his other arm, and he could feel it beginning to tighten its grip, to which he cried, "Hey, hey, hey! That one's real! I'll bleed out if you crush it, and if you wanted me dead, you wouldn't have bothered beaming me up or my family. What do you even want with us? We did nothing to you!"
"Silence, slave of Gaia,"
boomed the robotic voice of the one that snapped his cybernetic arm.
"Save your words for the council. It is they who seek you."
Adam was now confused. A council? Not an interrogator? They were going to put him up in a public forum like some kind of criminal? He decided to spend the rest of this escort in silence, lest his escorts decide to lighten their load by an additional limb. Eventually, after what felt like an impossibly long walk, given how small the vessel seemed when he saw it, he entered what appeared to be a massive chamber, a single floating walkway hovering over what appeared to be an abyss of indeterminate depth, ended in the middle of nothing with a circular platform. As they reached the platform, the one holding his arm roughly threw him to the center of it, as circular lines of electricity suddenly appeared like a cage around him, silent, but visibly dangerous enough to know that touching them is a bad idea. The robotic escorts remained where they were, blocking off the walkway, as if Adam had any hope of escaping this. After a few moments, rows upon rows of seats appeared all around Adam, floating platforms upon which sat all manner of alien species, tall, short, wide, thin, many-limbed and no-limbed, and everything in between. Did the bronze overlords have so many species? It has been quite a while. What if this isn't even them? But then again, the ones behind him were the spitting image of the ones that destroyed his village. It had to be them. "Welcome to the Council of Yoth. State your name and occupation." One of them spoke, a tall one in flowing robes, standing rather than sitting upon what appeared to be the largest and most preeminent of the platforms near the center of the entire array, despite sounding rather calm and collected. Their voice projected loudly throughout the entire chamber. At first, Adam said nothing, but after a few awkward moments decided that would get him nowhere. "Adam, Hunter." The one that first spoke, which Adam supposed was a leader of sorts, inquired. "A hunter of what, Adam?" Adam smiled slightly, unable to resist the temptation. "Dinner." There were quiet murmurs amongst the crowd of aliens. The leader put up two of its three arms with hands outstretched to quiet them fully. "A survivalist, then. You subsist on flesh," he said, as if it were some strange concept. Adam replied, mimicking the questioning inflection. "Yes. A man's gotta eat, you know, or die, one or the other." Pressing further to the point of annoying Adam, the leader asked, "But it must be the flesh of a living creature, not plants or their products." Adam sees what he's getting at and answered the actual question instead. "I'm omnivorous, yes. I eat whatever I can get my hands on that's edible, as long as it's not poisonous. And don't get high and mighty with me. We do make sure to respect the spirits of the fallen and thank them for their sacrifice. Plants feel pain, too, even if they can't make noise about it." More murmurs, much louder this time, though Adam couldn't pick up any of it, for it was all in different languages, which only caused Adam to realize that this leader was seemingly speaking his language, and somehow all of the others understood his own words. His mind raced at the thought of the kind of technology that required. He'd spent millennia developing all sorts of physical devices, but the people of the Earth only recently developed into a sapient species, capable of things like language. He hasn't exactly had time enough to do experiments on social technology, especially not with Eve in his life. Replacing a lost limb with a cybernetic? Easy. Talking to the first girl you'd seen in literally millions of years? That's some next-level stuff for sure, but he'd managed it, somehow. And it was worth every single awkward exchange and near-death encounter. She really did have a temper. He silently thanked Gaia that he and the entirety of her species were visibly identical, and apparently genetically similar enough to have kids. The leader alien speaks aloud again, quelling the increasingly dissonant choir of seemingly outraged politicians. "The Council will acknowledge the cultural views of Adam the Hunter. Let us get on to the main agenda. Adam, as evidenced by your clear understanding of digital age technology, the cybernetic limb you unfortunately lost, you cannot be a native of that planet. Is this true?" "No. I was born in that world, and if all goes well, I will die on it," he responds, denying the councilman's claim. The rest of the council begins to murmur again, but the quelling response from the councilman is quick. "Then how did you come to acquire such technology, when the rest of your species is so clearly tribalistic and primitive?" "I did my own research for a while and made it myself. Is that really so outrageous?" Adam said, knowing full well that it was. But hey, he can't help being a genius. This time the outrage was palpable, clearly not benefiting from the same voice projection as the leading alien.
It is outrageous to think that a cave-dwelling microbite developed digital age technology entirely on its own, within the span of a single lifetime. It's impossible, utterly, and you have the gall to claim such. Charlatan!"
The leading alien moved to quell again, but Adam interceded loudly. "Hey, put enough monkeys in a room with a typewriter and they can write even the greatest of works eventually.
I happen to be a very smart monkey. Though it took me a couple million years to invent the typewriter, that's still plenty of time."
This statement stunned the council into utter silence. Even the leader alien, whose face showed some kind of expression that Adam assumed was either surprise, shock, or perhaps admiration. Yeah, he went with admiration. The leader alien spoke up, his voice somewhat nervous.
"Surely you jest, Adam the Hunter. Millions of years is far too long for any organism to—"
Adam interjected.
"Your buddies here seem to know me. They called me Slave of Gaia, and boy do I remember them. Remember watching them slaughter my entire family the day before they took Freya off-world. Are you sure you're the Bronze? I'd have figured you were all, enlightened or whatever."
The leading alien's skin tone shifted from the lightest tealish color it originally was into a bone shade of white. The council erupted into argument and conflict. Every individual in the room was shouting, in languages Adam could not understand, at all the others. He relished in the turmoil. Even if it was a far cry from the revenge he only now realized he sorely desired. Seeing these aliens, seemingly the ones responsible for every bad thing that had ever happened to him, really made him want to call on Gaia right now. But chances are, they were already in space, and such a call would have no effect. It took several minutes before everything quieted down, and the leader alien had regained some semblance of control.
"Allow me to clarify. You, Adam the Hunter, claim to have lived—"
Adam interrupted, uninterested in maintaining decorum before his captors.
"Not claim. I did,"
the councilman begrudgingly corrected.
"Appear to have lived for millions. By the computators' calculations, that is, of that planet's orbital periods. Since before the collapse of the Bronze, you appear to be familiar with the bronze automatons they left behind, and you say that they recognized you and called you a slave of Gaia. Is that correct?"
Adam simply nodded, though this time it seems the councilman has established some modicum of order against the others, as they did not break out into open murmuring, though he could visibly see some of them doing so quietly amongst themselves.
"Pardon my suspicion, Adam, but it seems unlikely that you have had such close personal contact with figures of ancient mythology. Their existence itself is questionable, except for the Bronze, whose automatons serve as the only sign of their ever having been. Yet, for you, a living organism, to have survived as long as these very symbols of the indestructible might of Bronze Age technology, it is really difficult to believe. I'm sure you understand,"
he concluded, seemingly in search of some kind of justification.
"I don't need you to believe it, but if you really doubt it, I'm sure you have some kind of footage of the cells you were holding me and my wife and child in. My escorts here weren't exactly subtle about their distinct distaste for me."
He almost growled out the words, raising the cybernetic stump to show the council the damage they caused him. Silently, the leading alien nodded to an unseen figure, and suddenly, a holographic full-color display apparated in thin air in the open space between Adam and the council. A perfect replay of when the bronze automatons retrieved him from the cell, sound included. Many of the council aliens seemed to engage in various physical expressions, which Adam couldn't really discern. Some of them were similar enough to his physical makeup that he could guess some mixture of shock or surprise, but it's hard to tell with other species. Solemnly, the head alien bid the feed to be cut, and his tone changed from one of interrogation to one of genuine discussion.
"Setting aside the implications of the sudden emergence of proof of divine—"
Adam tilted his head at this. What? Divine? I mean, Gaia was powerful and all, but what kind of god can't go to space? Well, he didn't know. These were aliens. He may have had millions of years, but there's only so much you can learn entirely on your own. Every discovery took thousands of years to make, though when the people of the Earth came about, his progress sped up significantly. Maybe they knew something about her he didn't. The councilman continued.
"We brought you here with a simple goal in mind. We will endeavor to compensate you for the loss of your cybernetic limb and the potential psychological damages of these proceedings. We were unaware of how rough the bronze automatons had been. We did not know they were capable of displaying such violence towards sapient beings, so we had assumed you were treated fairly. I also see now that they interpreted our command to give you chambers in the most unfavorable way possible. As to our goal, we noticed clear electromagnetic signals of developed technology on the planet below us, currently designated Sol 3, and classified in the Bronze Archive as a death world. This naturally shocked us because, to our knowledge, it was impossible for any form of technology developed sapient to emerge on such worlds. Attempts to colonize them have always been met with difficulty.
Adam interjected again. I imagine. Gaia's definitely the type to hold a grudge, even if you aren't the Bronze. I can't see her trusting anyone but her own family on a world she has control over. The murmurs began again, but were quickly silenced.
Gaia again. This is a name we are familiar with, but it has only ever been mentioned once in the entirety of the Bronze Archive. The name that was called by Freya in her final moments. We know nothing else. Who is she? You say she controls the death worlds.
It was Adam's turn to be confused. So they aren't the Bronze men that tyrannized his people, but they have access to some kind of archive, and they can command their machines. This is rapidly becoming less and less understandable, he replies. I think so, at least. The last time I spoke with her, she said something about making sure they would never set foot on green soil again. When I asked, she just pointed to the sky, and after a few thousand years, when I discovered the world was round, I realized she was talking about other planets. The councilmen preemptively quelled the murmurs, expecting at this point for Adam to say ever more incredulous things.
May I ask then, how are you able to live on that world? Our scans of a genetic sample we retrieved indicate that you are not the same species as the world's natives. In the humor of your claims, why does Gaia allow you to live on her world but not anyone else? All attempts to colonize such planets end in failure. The wildlife becomes suicidally feral, flora becomes rampant and overtakes any technology-developed structure, and the more advanced attempts, which fight back against such advances, are met by seemingly impossible natural disasters. The very rock and earth open up to swallow them whole. We've long since discovered that all death worlds possess shocking amounts of tectonic activity, which makes long-term colonization impossible. You mean to say that this is, in fact, a defense mechanism of sorts, intended to actively prevent colonization by advanced species?
Adam shrugs. Sounds about right to me. Everything you described is more or less what happened after Freya was taken. Storms ravaged the earth, mountains moved, floods drowned everything, and ash rained from the sky. I survived only because Gaia spared me, specifically. I don't truly know why. Maybe she thinks I'm the only way to bring her daughter back. Maybe she just wanted me to watch. Either way, she doesn't allow me to die. Every time I do, I wake up the next morning like nothing happened. Hurts like hell, of course, and I avoid it whenever I can. He doesn't know why he's telling them all of this. It's not exactly pleasant memories. Maybe it's just been so long since he's had any kind of equal. Eve is wonderful, but she knows so little it's hard to talk about certain things. Though, in a way, it's exactly the sort of intellectual innocence he admires. She isn't really curious. She just takes things as they are. She has a bravery, a confidence in the face of the unknown that he admires, when faced with things he has no clue about. In fact, he remembers many times running from animals and monsters when he was living alone as a child after Gaia's fury. He spent unimaginable amounts of time just hiding in caves, leaving only to scrounge for barely edible scraps. He actually starved to death on a few occasions, only to wake up the next morning. Not a pleasant experience. He can't remember exactly how long it took him to figure out hunting. Growing up physically certainly helped. The leading alien sighs.
I see. Then the Council would like to request your aid in beseeching Gaia for forgiveness, I suppose. Though none of us were alive when whatever tragedy befell her. If it is possible for us to earn the right to colonize her world, we would like to do so.
The larger alien that shouted earlier stood up again.
Chairman Ezekiel, certainly you are not entertaining the foolish flights of fancy this primitive has concocted.
Chairman Ezekiel replied.
Councilman Athandor, be seated. Regardless of the truth, it is a fact that this so-called primitive has, by themselves, developed advanced technology that is capable of safely living on a death world, bypassing whatever mechanisms actively prevented our colonization. If we must play along in order to share in this privilege, then I see no harm in doing so. Who knows? Perhaps we will get to meet with an individual who was there during the Age of the Bronze.
He turns back to Adam after Councilman Athandor seats himself again in a harumph.
Adam the Hunter.
Just Adam, please, he replies. Chairman Ezekiel nods.
Adam, we wish to work with you so that one day the bounty of life that is present on Death Worlds may be shared and enjoyed by all sapient beings. Will you aid us?
Adam gave it a thought, a very, very long thought. He thought of the possible consequences of working with, ostensibly, enemies of Gaia. He thought of the consequences for what he considers to be all that remains of his people, the people of the Earth. He really needs to workshop a name for them. He thought, ultimately, of what saying no might mean for his wife and child, who are still stuck inside a cell aboard an alien spaceship, even if it is only temporary, even if it is only a ruse. If it gets them back home, safe and sound, then,
yes,
Adam said,
I will. The first thing we need to do is find Freya and give her back.
Chairman Ezekiel shifted, seemingly uncomfortable.
That might be difficult. As I said, it is impossible for organisms to live that long, and even if this Freya had a long enough natural lifespan, the Bronze archives clearly state that she perished while the Bronze were using her.
Adam is no fool. He heard final words clear enough earlier, but he had an idea. If he could find love in the startlingly similar-looking people of the Earth, perhaps Gaia could as well.
I have an idea. We just need to make a new one.